Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm so impressed you're here. Isn't it, it's a game changer, the fact that our phones turn forward now, isn't it? Remember the day when everyone used to be late or half the people were late? Forgot to put their clocks forward. Well, we've got an old-fashioned one up there, so I've got an hour and 20 minutes to speak, according to that clock. So, yes, we're starting a new series, How to Have a Good Life. And I might kick it off straight away by saying that my task today is to introduce the book of Proverbs and just talk a little bit about what it's all about and how we can understand it a bit better. And that takes about 9 chapters, but you'll be thankful to know we're not going to read 9 chapters of Proverbs today. But I will start with the very beginning at the beginning and just read, which is on the screen to kick us off, the introduction, which is just a few verses from Proverbs chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for learning wisdom and discipline, for understanding insightful sayings, for receiving prudent instruction and in righteousness, justice, and integrity, for teaching shrewdness to the inexperienced, knowledge and discretion to a young man. Let a wise person listen and increase learning, and let a discerning person obtain guidance. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. Anybody have any idea how many decisions we make on an average day? Anyone want to guess?
10,000.
Apparently somebody's counted them, and 35,000, give or take 1 or 2. No wonder we get tired at the end of a day. It's a lot, isn't it, living this life? 35,000 on average decisions you make every day. Now, some of those are big decisions and some of them are tiny ones that kind of just happen naturally. So there's a whole mixed bag in there. But our lives, our days are jam-packed with lots and lots of decisions. Many Christians think, and many people think, that what's written in the Bible has mostly to do with just getting us into heaven, getting us saved, and just being ready that when we die, we go to heaven. And of course, the Bible does have a lot to do with that, but it's not mostly to do with that, because in actual fact, the Bible is equally concerned with your 35,000 decisions that you make every day. And it really wants you to do it well. It wants you to do it to have a good life. It wants you to make those decisions well. Jesus himself prayed the Lord's Prayer, and he said, we know very well, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So right back then, Jesus is saying, hey, we want heaven on earth. We want to live this life really well. The book of Proverbs, so if the Bible is all about us making good decisions, having a good life, Proverbs is the creme de la creme of that. It is the most concerned out of all the books in the Bible that we make good decisions and that we have a good life. And it has clear ways for us to do that and a lot to tell us about it. So 35,000 decisions, it's not about, we can't focus on every one of those, Lord, should I buy Colgate or Oral-B? We just have to grab, there's some things that the Lord says, no, you just make that decision. But there are some decisions in life that would be so much, the consequences of that would be so much better if we did involve Proverbs more and we involved God's wisdom into it. The late great Tim Keller, says that one of the main messages of Proverbs is you've never really thought enough about anything. That's what Proverbs is telling us. It's saying, listen, my son, I want to help you because there's lots of things in life that we just do that we actually don't really give enough thought to, and Proverbs wants to help us with that. So first of all, just a little bit, I guess, of background of Proverbs. Proverbs, some will know, but Proverbs is part of what the Bible calls wisdom literature. So that is a style, so Psalms, Job, Ecclesiastes, those sort of books, they're quite poetic and in style, and they use a lot of imagery and certain ways of writing, quite different to some of the other books. Proverbs and that sort of style, that genre, was very common in ancient times. And you can understand why. There were no books, there were no Bibles. Wisdom had to be passed down from within families and then down to different generations. So Proverbs was really cool for that. It was because it's these short sayings that are really memorable and really vivid, and use this imagery that you can remember them. Even some of them we use in our own culture today, but you remember them and then you talk about them with your family and you teach them to your children. We heard that in there, teach this to your sons, and so you learn them. So for example, I just looked up a couple, was late, I'm sure there's funnier ones than this, but Proverbs 21:9, this is kind of an example of one. It's better to live alone in the corner of an attic than with a quarrelsome wife in a lovely home. Like, if you want to be a mouse, off you go. But I'm sure there's times my husband's been looking for a space in the roof to get away with me at times. But it's that sort of idea that you can remember it. Wow, you're using your imagination, you remember it, and then you can pass it on. And these sayings are not always religious. It's interesting that all of the cultures had them. So not just the Israelites had Proverbs. So all of the different nations had them, and they shared them. But we'll get to why Israel's Proverbs were slightly different. But they weren't always religious. Many of them, as we're talking about today, are just how to have a good life. Again, it's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome, complaining wife. So it just goes on, doesn't it? This poor woman. But anyway, they're quite interesting. But it would be very wrong for us to just think that Proverbs is a secular book, even though it's very practical, because there is this real theme that goes through it that sets it apart from all of the other cultures at the time, and that is that this phrase that comes up all the time, which is the fear of the Lord, is beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord. Now, when we think about fear, don't think about being terrified of God and having to hide from him, although I don't know about you, sometimes when God moves in my life, it is quite scary and it is quite awesome. But rather than that, it's this idea of just this reverence and awe of God in our lives. And really, when we bring it down to a nutshell, it's just being able, this fear of the Lord comes right down into the everyday. What does God think about this? Have I thought to ask God about this choice in my life? What does Jesus think about this? What would Jesus do? You know, the bracelets, what would Jesus do? So the fear of the Lord brought down is really about that. It said, there's a phrase that I... Oh, cool, she's with me. Thank you, Mon. There's a phrase, I'm not sure what the next... I haven't, the slide's not up there, but just somebody wrote that Proverbs, I thought this was a really cool sentence, Proverbs keeps us connected in holy obedience to the ordinary. So it's being able to say that the decisions in my life that might seem quite ordinary at times, do I actually connect to God reverently? Do I fear him in the sense? Do I ask him? Do I care what he thinks? Do I invite him into that decision? Because Proverbs says when you do that, that's how to have a good life, that God will help us with all of those decisions. Another aspect about it was that these Proverbs, back when the original hearers and readers and memorizers of it, they would share it in community. So they'd share it with each other in families and pass it down. So Proverbs are really meant for us to share together and to talk to together. And this is kind of just a little bit of a side advertisement for something that we're doing. Anne came up with this great idea that over the next couple of weeks we're going to do a devotion on Proverbs together, and we're sharing it with our Connect group leaders, Connect groups. It'd be something great to jump on together and be able to do this devotion around Proverbs with Tim and Kathy Keller. Nobody better than those guys to take us through and to help us, because the point is that these Proverbs were written thousands of years ago. It's ancient literature. So it's not always easy to kind of understand them. And as Tim Keller said, Proverbs says you don't think deeply. Sometimes it's hard to think deeply about them because we're not back then. We live now thousands of years later. So it's great to do it together. If you'd like to be part of that, then you can just see Anne after church and she'll link you into to the chat group, and every morning you can receive a proverb or a devotion over the next couple of weeks and comment. Let's dig deep together with them. The other thing that comes up, or the main idea, wisdom literature, is this idea of wisdom, that Proverbs are supposed to help us have a good life by helping us to be wise in our decisions. In a nutshell, what the Bible says wisdom is, it's the art of living a good life in whatever conditions we find ourselves in. It's not promising us a perfect life, but it's just saying whatever situation you're in, there's wisdom for it. God will help you to live a good life. And wisdom is the biblical term for living every day, as Jesus said, on earth as it is in heaven. Wouldn't it be amazing to live a life like that, to just go, here I am, but I feel like God's moving through me and God's answering the prayers. So I'd like to have a look at just two passages from within, actually both from Proverbs chapter 8, that have a look and we'll see in them some aspects of wisdom. Rather than hearing me talk for the whole time, I've asked, firstly, Letta, if he wouldn't mind reading the first passage. It's not on the screen, so you have to use your listening ears. So Letta's just going to read this first passage for us. Thanks, Letta.
The Lord acquired me at the beginning of his creation, before his works of long ago. I was formed before ancient times, from the beginning, before the earth began. It was there when he established the heavens, when he laid out the horizon on the surface of the ocean. When he laid out the foundation of the earth, I was a skilled craftsman beside him. I was his delight every day, always rejoicing before him. I was rejoicing in his habitat world, delighting in the children of Adam.
Thank you, Letta. So this one's for all the big picture people, all the science buffs. It's the big picture, back in creation. Proverbs says wisdom was there, right back there. God got me right back at creation when I was creating the earth. I don't often think that big, but it's quite mind-blowing to think that wisdom was there, that was part of the creation we see. I don't know whether you heard the story or the article. I heard this article this week about this asteroid named Bennu. Did anyone hear that story? Bennu the asteroid. So what happened is that Bennu is described as a near-Earth asteroid, and they're actually concerned that in 50 years it could actually hit the Earth. So it's floating out there near Earth. So it's as tall as the Empire State Building, and this little satellite headed out at hundreds of thousands of kilometres an hour and went for a 4 billion mile journey over 7 years, landed on Bennu, took 2.5 kilos of soil or matter from Bennu, and brought it back and landed on the Utah desert. So they're all so excited that it came back because they're wanting to dig into it. They're fascinated because they go, Bennu is from a chaotic time, and they feel like it's going to help them understand our beginnings or the universe's beginnings. How cool is that? And I was just thinking, there's just these massive numbers, flying for 3.5 years over 2 billion miles to get some soil from something that is near Earth. Creation, we are part of something so big. And we feel like we're the centre of the universe, but actually we're not even a dot in the size of God and the power and the majesty and the awesomeness of God. And God says, when I created it, wisdom was with me. Wisdom says, I was there. And I wonder what implications that has for you, because for me, it helps me think, when things are so much bigger than me, when my issues, my problems, my decisions, I don't know what to make, I can't. I think it's a wonderful thing to think about. Wisdom was way back at creation. It can handle your problems. It can handle when our worlds cave in and everything just is overwhelming. Wisdom was there at that time. I'd like Chris now to read the second passage, She needs an ice cream? No, she
Needs something. Doesn't wisdom call out? Doesn't understanding make her voice heard? Beside the gates leading into the city, at the main entrance, she cries out, "People, I call out to you. My cry is to the children of Adam. Learn to be shrewd, you who are inexperienced. Develop common sense, you who are foolish. Listen, for I speak of noble things, and what my lips say is right. Accept my instruction instead of silver, and knowledge rather than pure gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and nothing desirable can equal it."
Thank you, Chris. This is another really cool thing about Proverbs. It often describes wisdom as a woman. And the reason is that wisdom is a feminine noun, hokmah. Forgive me if my Hebrew is not up to scratch. Hokmah, which is, I was speaking to Kenza earlier, who's visiting today, and she was reminding me or helping me make sure that I had it right. That, like for French, everything is female or masculine. You know, male, female or male. Chairs are female or male. Everything. With this word of wisdom, it's a female word. In English, we don't have that. So it makes sense then. That's one of the reasons why wisdom is described as a woman. The other thing is it just makes sense, doesn't it? But the lessons are for men and women as well. We learn best, I think I said it before, we learn best through stories and images. So if we're just given a whole lot of information about what wisdom is like, we'll easily forget it. But if we think of it as a woman standing, welcoming people in, it helps us to kind of understand what wisdom is like, and it makes them more concrete. One of the theologians I was reading as I was preparing said this cool thing. He says, a chapter which is to soar beyond time, because that's actually Letters part of the chapter comes after Chris's. It says, the chapter which is about to soar above time and space opens at a street level, as relevant here as in heaven. Don't you think that's absolutely amazing that not in the big picture of creation, instead of that, wisdom is pictured as a woman just standing at the gate, waiting, it says, for anyone to come. And she's saying, if you're inexperienced, if you feel a bit foolish in life, if you don't know what to do just in your everyday, I'll be here. I'm just going to be at the gate. You just come over to me and you can talk to me anytime. And if you come and you ask me, I'll pour into your lap something that is worth so much more than gold and silver. I'll give you what you need to live a good life. I'll give you wisdom. I'll give you insight. And isn't that just the implications of that? On one side, you've got wisdom that is bigger than anything we'll ever need. And on the other hand, you've got it so accessible, so personal, that whatever you need, just come, she'll be there for you, which is really amazing. I'd like to, as we kind of begin to bring this together now, is to bring these ideas of, we've got these ideas of wisdom being something big, we've got this idea of wisdom being something intimate. I'd like to read with that in mind, the idea of fearing God and just being able to ask him about our lives and our situations and our 35,000 questions we have every day or decisions we have to make. I'd like to read a very familiar passage. I think most of you might have heard it. In the Pentecostal circle, it's sometimes been misunderstood, and everyone's striving to be this woman. In fact, this woman is wisdom. But in thinking about wisdom and how she is in our everyday, I'd like, as I read it, for you just to apply it to your own life and think about wisdom in your life and what wisdom might be wanting to say to you. When I thought about a picture of a woman, I'm thinking, what about if wisdom was, if the Proverbs 30 woman was a real woman who would she be? And I thought of this woman, the next woman, Angela Merkel. Isn't that a great name, Angela Merkel? She's probably not going to win a beauty contest, which is the point, because it talks about Proverbs not being deeper than beauty, but this woman is the boss. She's known as kind of the one that held the EU together, the one that they described her as a grown-up leader. And this Proverbs 31 woman is kind of like that, I think. You know, she's the boss when you read it. This woman has a huge capacity. Now, of course, it's not Angela Merkel, it's not anyone else. It is wisdom itself. So as I was going to get rid of some of the verses out of here, but I thought it's so beautiful that I just want to read it in total. So let's read it together. Where am I? I'm here. Oh, I do want to say, just before I do, that this actually is an acrostic poem, the way it was written. So it starts with a Hebrew, the Hebrew alphabet. The first it goes through. So every line starts with one of those letters. And traditionally it was recited by husbands and children during Sabbath meal together. So again, just reminding themselves, what's wisdom like? Who is she? How will she help us to live a good life? Okay. Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 31. Who can find a wife of noble character? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack any good. She rewards him with good, not evil, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax. She works with willing hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing her food from far away. She rises while it is still night and provides food for her household and portions for her female servants. She evaluates a field and buys it. She plants a vineyard with her earnings. She draws on her strength and reveals that her arms are strong. She sees that her profits are good and her lamp never goes out at night. She extends her hands to the spinning staff and her hands hold the spindle. She reaches out her hands to the poor and she extends her hands to the needy. She's not afraid for her household when it snows, for all in her household are doubly clothed. She makes her own bed coverings. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known at the city gates, where he sits among the elders of the land. She makes and sells linen garments. She delivers belts to the merchants. Strength and honour are her clothing, and she can laugh at the time to come. Her mouth speaks wisdom, and loving instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the activities of her household and is never idle. Her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also praises her. Many women have done noble deeds, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. Give her the reward of her labour, and let her works praise her at the city gates. It's a really beautiful piece of writing, isn't it? Reminding us that when we choose wisdom, when we put God first in our decisions, when we read what the Bible has to read, that we're safe, like the family of that woman, that our needs will be met, we'll be able to live a good life. We won't be afraid for the future. We will be warm in the winter time. Wisdom is here to help us to live that really good life and help us with every one of those 35,000 daily decisions. It's big enough when our decisions are overwhelming, and it's close enough and kind enough with a listening ear when we just want to ask about daily things. God's got it sorted for us, hasn't he? Who does this sound like when we talk about being at creation and we talk about being at the city gate and handing out to the poor and meeting the needs? Who does this also sound like? It's Jesus. We can't fully understand Proverbs. Wisdom is one thing, but actually Jesus is the ultimate wisdom. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Jesus was there at the beginning with wisdom. He is wisdom for us. Jesus even said in Luke 11:31, he said, I am the new Solomon. He already told us he's wisdom itself. And then in John 7:37, he said, anyone who's thirsty, come and drink, and I'll give you living water that will never run out. Jesus is the woman standing right. Jesus was the woman hanging, or the man hanging on the cross right in the city for everyone. He is wisdom. He is our wisdom. And Proverbs is saying to us, why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask Jesus? Why don't you fear him enough? Why don't we fear him enough to ask him about our daily decisions? Because he wants to pour wisdom into our laps. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at specifics of what Proverbs, the themes of some of the key themes of Proverbs, and really dig out some stuff for the nitty-gritty of our relationships and what we go through. But the big picture is that Proverbs is here for us to gather and to understand what God is like and to help us make some of those decisions. So